guys, Caleb Tennant here. We just finished shooting with MotoOnline.com. We just got to test the all-new 2023 YZ450 here at the Goat Farm. Such a privilege to ride at Ricky Carmichael's stomping grounds. This is where he grew up and won all of these championships to become the best rider of all time. And to be able to ride this was such a huge treat for us. So such an amazing day and experience getting to do that. My first impressions with the bike, it's got a whole new look to it, a whole new sleek look, a lot more thinner, looks a little bit more sporty, more agile. The overall first impression of the bike, it looks a whole lot more streamlined, which is great. And then getting on the bike, they made all those improvements that the previous bike was lacking. They really made a good impact with the bike from the previous one. And from power delivery, the engine, the handling and suspension, the chassis setup, I think everything moved in a positive direction. So looking forward to breaking all those things down. So first of all, the engine package, they had an increase in power with the engine. I know they had changed the intake to allow a lot more airflow coming into the bike, which increased the power, but it also felt a lot more controllable and smooth. So before I would feel like, especially with the 450 and the Yamaha 450, the power would be extremely harsh and kind of out of control, where with this bike, they've made the gearing, the power a lot smoother and a lot longer. So you could really feel the throttle control and the power under you, and I felt like the bike was a lot more controllable. I feel like in corners you could be in second or third gear. For me, I preferred being in third through most of the track, and it was so smooth under me that I didn't feel like I was trying to fight the bike or trying to fight the power delivery, which was great. So for me, I honestly felt I rode between second and third gear mainly through the whole track. A couple of times I got to fourth, but not too often. So it was really controllable to ride, which was a great upgrade to the bike. I think one of the biggest changes was the chassis setup with this 450. I felt with the previous bike, it felt really big and really wide, a lot more harder to throw the bike around, especially as a smaller guy. I felt with this bike, it felt a little bit more like a 250, a lot more slender, which made it a lot easier to pitch the bike into corners, a lot more controllable. I could kind of throw the bike around a lot more on this 450 compared to the previous model, so that was a huge improvement. I believe they also lowered the foot pegs and pulled them back a little bit, which made it a lot more controllable with your feet. Also, they raised up the seat position, which made it a lot easier to sit more forward in the corners. I feel like before there was a little bit of a slant in the middle of the seat, where now it was a lot more centered, so you could move around and find your position a lot easier. But the biggest difference for me was the radiator being tighter and the whole bike in general, which made it a lot more of a feel for me with the bike. So with the suspension, I was really surprised with the suspension. Normally for me, I really struggle with stock suspension, and I must say with this bike, it was definitely the best out of the box that I've ridden. So I was really impressed with that. For me, especially when I was riding at 75%, there was a lot of plushness to the whole feel of the bike. I never made any changes to the shock. I thought the shock was unbelievable. The forks, when I started pushing really hard and it got really rough, I feel like the forks were bouncing me a little bit. So I stiffened up a little bit on the compression, and that made a huge difference. But how much the bike settled itself and how controlled the suspension felt, especially for a 450 for me, I was extremely surprised, and I felt really comfortable straight away. gearing, I know they kept the gearing the same as the previous bike, but it did feel different. I think with the upgraded mapping and everything else, with electronics with the bike, the gearing really felt extremely smooth. So first of all, the shifting, I never felt a misshift. It was really smooth shifting between the gears. But again, I pretty much stayed in 90% of the track between second and third gear. So I didn't find myself having to shift too much, which makes the riding and your throttle control a whole lot easier when you're not having to play with the gears so much. So I really enjoyed that part of the bike. Along with this chassis and engine setup, I think the biggest difference is they've lost over 5 pounds with this bike, and 5 pounds might not sound like a lot, but it feels a lot more on the bike. They've compacted everything together, so everything inside the engine, every part of the bike is being compacted to make things a lot smaller, and they've taken a little bit of weight off a little bit of each piece of the bike, and especially inside the engine. What that does is it makes the bike feel a whole lot lighter when you're riding it. So like I said, even though you have dropped 5 pounds, it feels like they've dropped about 10 pounds off the bike. So how much lighter this bike feels overall, like I said, a lot more like a 250 is a huge difference, especially for someone like me being only 150 pounds. So overall with this bike, they've made pretty much every positive improvement. I'm trying to find a little bit of negative stuff I could talk about, but honestly they've taken so much from what the riders had felt from the previous 450 and taken all those bad things and really made a huge improvement on every single one of those. And it's not like this bike was bad. I mean, they've just won 2 championships between Supercross and Outdoors on the 450, so it's obviously an amazing bike, but I think certain riders struggle with it, especially me being a smaller guy. And I was really impressed by this bike overall, how they've been able to slim everything down, make the bike feel a whole lot lighter and more controllable, extremely smooth power delivery, amazing chassis and suspension setup. They've compacted this whole bike into something so much smaller. The ride position, every little bit, they've taken so much care in making those differences. So it was a huge privilege to be able to be one of the first to ride this bike and test it at this amazing facility. So again, thank you MotoOnline, thank you Yamaha and Star Racing for having us out here, and thanks for the epic experience, and I hope you've enjoyed the videos.